Welcome to my demonstration of the 20 BB cap and short stack NoteCaddy package. So to start, what is NoteCaddy? Being that this program has been around for 2 years and has changed significantly since it started, I am still surprised to find out that a lot of people and professionals don't even necessarily know what it is. So basically it has joined forces with HUD Manager 2, and it is a special app, and what it does is it takes automated notes based on specific parameters that are set by the user, and then from that point on it requires no further effort on your part. It automatically reads hand histories and parses and sifts the data in a way that would be basically impossible to do on your own. And there are various other packages for different game types, and even I was wondering at first, why would you pay anyone to do this when you can make it on your own? And 3 weeks into the project, I found out exactly why you would. It's very time consuming. Even just to learn how to do it at the barely proficient level would take several days of your time. I mean, the opportunity cost alone for even a semi-professional, you're looking into the thousands of dollars. So would I do this again? Absolutely not, but at the same time it was 100% worth it. So basically the kind of material that we have here, we have over 200 specific definitions. Everything is separated by position, and it is organized into special pop-ups, as you will see. So the kind of stuff that we have are opening and limping ranges, cold call ranges, all positions, small 3-bet and 3-bet shove ranges. As you know, it's a common cap tactic now to mix small 3-bets with quality hands and with bluffs. And guys do have various ranges here, but with NoteCaddy we can actually see what those cards are. Small 3-bet, the actual range, as I was saying, and what we call the true shove ranges. Basically what that refers to is essentially it's a dirty tactic, again, that cap players like to do. And specifically it aids in their bluff tendency for their small 3-bet. What a lot of guys will do is they'll either put in like half their stack or 3/4 or 19 big blinds or whatever. Basically they will do that and then will not fold to a 4-bet, so it alters their stat. However, we use NoteCaddy in order to group all raises of a certain size and consider them as either open shoves or a 3-bet shove or whatever, so you can actually see through their attempts to warp their HUD stats. So back to small 3-betting, sometimes you might want to determine whether or not it's a better move to go ahead and shove and potentially lose their business, or to try and get them to call. We can see how weak or strong their flatting ranges are. On the converse, if you see that their flatting range or their 4-betting range is really strong, that means that they're susceptible to a small 3-bet bluff. True fold to 4-bet. 4-bet goes back to what I was saying as far as basically eliminating any time that they are going to 3-bet specifically and always call a 4-bet. So by seeing that, we can see how often they are full of shit when they 3-bet you small. C-bet ranges versus 1 and 2 opponents. By default, we have this against the blinds, and as most people know, a lot of guys will bluff a single opponent, or not nearly as often as they will 2 opponents, and we can see what those ranges are in both scenarios. Missed C-bet and delayed C-bet ranges are some of my favorite ones. As we know, since the C-bet is so incredibly common, it's a lot more interesting to figure out what is going on when they choose to check it back. Very important, we have BB defense, ranges, and actions. The common ones: check call, donk, and check raises. Specifically, the donk and check raise ranges, how cat players choose to do that now is very different than you'll see in any of the game types, since your average open is for the min bet. That does mean that there are a lot of playback attempts and leveling scenarios going on here. So some guys have specifically a strong range to donk. Maybe the board is paired and they flopped trips, so they're doing it to trigger a raise, whereas a lot of guys might do that with a series of air or draws intending to 3-bet. A lot of guys will check raise on boards where they know that your opening range has missed a large percentage of the time. Villain responses to C-bets, both IP and OOP, just like with their missed C-bet range, we have definitions that show the ranges that they're checking back when you check it to them, and then even has graphs that show how weak or strong that is on average. And then, perhaps most importantly, we have all the blind versus blind play. It's the trickiest thing you can do because the ranges are so wide. The C-bets are so frequent as to be meaningless. Everything, from when they bet and then follow it up with a check raise to check raise in the flop, raising the flop in defense range. Anyhow, I do have a few examples of some custom pop-ups that we made that we inserted the NoteCaddy information to, so let's just take a look at that. Alright, shove ranges. Now, one of the features of NoteCaddy is that it can compare how often a certain action is taken, or the strength of a certain action is, and compare it to the player pool on the whole. And as a bit of a disclaimer here, some of the stuff in the pop-ups for my own personal use I did choose to disable. So yours would look a little bit different from what you see here. However, all the definitions are the same. And over here, these are called the spark graphs, and it's definitely one of the coolest features of NoteCaddy, in that it can, show the range of strength of whole cards and actions as well, while also showing what they call implied weakness. Now, implied weakness would be a situation where somebody bets and then folds to a raise, or they bet and then check fold. It does also have implied strength, but to me that's a meaningless stat, simply because if somebody were to make a C-bet and then the opponent folds, that would be considered implied strength. But of course, anytime that somebody bets and somebody folds, that implies strength, but it's to the point where it's meaningless. However, seeing implied weakness is just an excellent feature, and that is something that is not for the shove specifically. It's more for post-flop ranges. It will show up as a large spike over here, as you will see. So when it's colored green, that means it's slightly less than average. And it'll say 5%, 45% less than average, as opposed to when it shows up red, that's more than the average player pool. So notice how obviously, say, shove tendencies will vary dramatically between where the open comes from and where the jam comes from. So a button shove would be a lot tighter than if you're looking at, say, a blind versus blind shove. So since obviously we can look at guy's HUD stats and see, say, he's jamming against a small blind open about 25% of the time, that isn't nearly as telling as being able to look at the hands he is doing it with. So right here we have the fourth line down, BB shove versus SB. You got your small pocket pairs, that's average. Looks like he's shoving all his aces and then his big kings and Jack 10. Notice how you aren't seeing any truly weak hands showing up here. Whereas there are some other guys who might flat with all the top of their range but then shove all their crap, like say 10-4 suited. So each player in each scenario might have a 3-bet of say 20%, but it's comprised of completely different hands. So now let's move to small 3-bet ranges. Here we have them divided by 4x, which would be, to simplify and to account for a certain amount of error, or rather sample size error, we grouped all the 4x small 3-bets to 4.9x, specifically to encompass the 4x and 4.5x. Guys who will do a 5x, that tends to mean something different, and for the example I took, this has no 5x range. So the small 3-bet range would be the total ranges of the two, and then it would also be the 4x versus the 5x. So by looking at it in this example, also, sorry, if you notice that these are all 100%, that's simply because I didn't set the frequency. That is something that can be turned on or off, because as your NoteCaddy generates notes, it can take up a lot of processing power. And specifically, since there are a lot of opportunities to attempt this, this one is the most draining of your resources. So you can actually get these figures down to the percentage, but I don't think they're particularly useful. I want to see what the value range is. So if you look down, you see like a 4x 3-bet range. Sevens, deuces, ace 10 suited plus, ace 7 to ace 6, ace 9, and queen 5 offsuit. Now, using a little bit of intelligence, you see the queen 5, and that's a point where he was caught bluffing. Maybe somebody called, and for whatever reason it got shown down. But this obviously would not be part of a range that he would raise and then call off a shove. However, this a7 a6 is very unusual. So it's using information like this that you can cross-reference with the chart that I had and determine a value range, and then determine how often he's bluffing by looking at his true fold to 4-bet stat. And then from there, obviously it spits out a range of hands that you can reshove with. And notice how it would take a long time of taking notes and observing every action in order to gain all this information right here. Another very interesting thing. Now we got 4-bet ranges and small 3-bet flatting ranges. By looking at the 4-bet range, as I had explained a little earlier on, the weaker it is, the more profitable it might be to 3-bet small and then get them to rejam over you. Now, if you were to know, I would say that this here is pretty typical. You know, 10s plus, pocket 3s, it'd probably be an unusual scenario. Ace 8 is a little bit weak, but that's not, but we need to consider this compared to what they would call a shove with, and Ace 8 is pretty typical, especially if we're looking at a hand that's on the button, Ace Jack and Ace 10. So what this tells me is that since it's fairly strong, and he only flatted the small 3-bet 12% of the time. That means that this guy is somebody you can use to bluff against. So I would ignore the fact that he did call, say, a King 10 suit in these rather weak hands. That might have been frustration for some other reason. But also, just so you know, this is specifically made so that this information is not dirty. And what I mean by that is, suppose you get min 3-bet, you know, in a 1-2 game, you make it 4, they make it 6. Everybody calls that. So if that information was in there, you would see all kinds of crap. You would see pocket deuces, you would see 5-6 suited, whatever. We actually made this so the only hands that count are ones where it was not an all-in play. So it's not like the guy only had 4.5 big blinds left. He had to have money behind, and he had to make a 3-bet between, actually it was 3.75 big blinds to specifically 5. So basically we pretty much set it to parameters where it would be impossible to fool NoteCaddy. And of course, if they change tactics, we can always change this information and these parameters, and then create a new version, and you can upload, and basically nobody will ever trick your HUD. Alright, so now let's look at some post-flop stuff. Missed C-bet ranges. As I said, I do consider this to be more interesting in C-bet ranges, which of course we do have, but these are just some examples. MCB OOP range, that would be, suppose a guy raises on the cutoff and then gets called by the button. So notice this big spike in weakness. That's his implied weakness, and it says implied weakness -4. That means 4 out of the 40 samples. So that's 10% right there. And then look what it has. It has nothing. This is his range. Pair plus a flush draw, pair plus open-ended straight draw. And this arrow here is actually, I should have explained it earlier, you can click that, and then, not that this is something you could really use in real time, but it will pull up a replayer and then show all the examples of these hands, so you can look it over. But this guy would be a target for flatting and then swiping the pot from him when you've got nothing. Or if you have something like top pair with a good kicker and you're looking to get action, definitely consider checking it back. But also notice, on the other hand, check calls with top pair, top kicker. So you could definitely look at the situation there through the replayer. But that would be something for offline analysis, which NoteCaddy is also incredible for. Now we got the dirty BB flats versus the IP raise. First of all, we have the range. Total flats versus IP. These are set specifically to a single open raise and no caller. For other guys, there is a compilation of BB flat specifically versus cutoff or button steal, which in that case the range could change dramatically. But if you notice that this specific opponent has a really top heavy range, so that shows that if there's more than one Broadway card that falls, especially if you have some okay value, definitely consider checking it back. Now we have a donk range here. The queens overpair, obviously this would be the queens he flattered right here. 2 overs plus a straight draw. Implied weakness, 2 examples, and he's donking 37%. So this here doesn't tell us too much. But now, look, he check raises with ace high and 2 overs, king high and 2 overs, top pair high kicker. So not particularly strong. This is a guy who is probably susceptible to a rebluff. But it looks like, under the circumstances, you would want to have at least a bit of equity to do it. Donks, flop, and turn. Implied weakness. 2 examples, and then 2 overs plus straight draw. So we only have 4 samples here, but it looks like it's just not particularly strong. So this is a guy you might want to call down, or if you flop a good draw, call the flop and then jam on his bet on the turn. There's a lot of different ways that this information can be read. And now getting more into the meat of it, here we have BVB, SB Steel tendencies. This just completely rich with information. We do have replaced, say, SB Open for like a 2x Steel. This guy is 67% and 57% versus Hero. Although I have noticed that that number doesn't tend to fluctuate as much as I had originally anticipated. So, notice this large spike here is large implied weakness. So SBC bet. Now, if he's opening, let's just say 60% of the time, and C betting 80% of the time, just a huge portion of the time, he is going to have nothing. This is a guy who is susceptible to a raise bluff. He's betting ace high 1 over, ace high 2 overs. Notice how he is betting this as opposed to having the option of checking it. He's betting bottom pair. Not everybody does that. Check raises. Pocket aces. Ace high 1 over. Combo draw. Implied strength. Implied weakness. If you look over at the graph, you will see that this is the kind of guy, if he checks to you, bet your top pair, bet your second pair, good kicker, and then call it off. His bet check call range is middle pair, pair plus flush draw, pocket pair under high card, 2 pair. Doesn't happen very often, but looks pretty weak. This is the kind of guy you might consider floating with some kind of value, and then if he checks, go for a 2-barrel bluff. We have his turn C bet frequencies, basically following up the flop C bet with the turn C bet. Bottom pair, 2 examples. Implied weakness 6, so middle set. Basically, if you look down here, I'm not seeing a whole lot of strength on the graph. So this is a guy you can call down. Now bet flop check raise turn. This is something that guys do. It can be pretty annoying. Kings overpair, top set, trip slow kicker. That's very strong. A lot of guys will take this line, they'll c-bet with air, and then they'll check raise when they pick up some kind of draw, typically a flush draw. Not so with this guy. And if you see SB River c-bet, not a whole lot of samples you will usually see here, and it will typically be strong. So specifically, we are more interested in what they do on the flop as well as the turn. And the last example we're going to look at is BB defending versus the SB Steel. We have a ton of stats for this, but I just wanted to I just pulled apart a good example of one that's really usable. We actually have one that can take up this entire slide with all the definitions that are generated. For one, we have the BB flat versus the 2x range. Notice, got a guy flatting ace-jack suited, that's pretty unusual. King-9 suited, that's standard. Ace-7 suited, ace-deuce suited. So that means that this guy is not susceptible to somebody just firing away on an ace-high board, you know. That ace comes up there, you might just want to think about bluffing one time. rather than just following through to the river, which a lot of guys will blindly do. They'll just blast all their chips in the middle. There is a presence of Broadway type cards here, so you're definitely going to want to hold back on those mid to high range wet boards. You're probably not going to get a whole lot of folds from him. And we do have fold versus the min raise. This guy's at 47%. That's pretty high. But then his fold versus c-bet is only 14%. So if this is the kind of guy, for instance, if he's not... also, yeah, I should point out that this fold versus c-bet is specific only to blind versus blind play. I mean, we don't care what he's doing in general. We only want to know what he's doing in this specific scenario. He's raising the c-bet 28%, only 14 samples, but that's pretty high. Anyhow, back to floats on the flop. Ace high, 1 over. Okay, so he flats his ace and he's not necessarily giving up. Implied weakness, 3 examples. That means he was pushed off the hand. King high, 2 overs, middle pair. Look at the graph. This is a guy that you can double or triple barrel off the hand. So, now that this overly long demonstration is done, hopefully people will have a better understanding of this. We're considering moving around the pricing, because that's another thing that the guys seem to be hesitant about. And specifically, we chose to do that not because we think a million people are going to spend $1,500 on a 510 version, but rather to reduce the overall saturation through the mid-stakes and not make those games too tough to beat, whereas we really want to help out the smaller stakes guys. So we are hoping to build a community of people who can work to introduce new material and help us improve it, and also learn to strategize it better. So anyone who thinks they have something special to offer, we're always willing to work with people on prices, coaching, you name it. So I'd like to hear back from you. Thank you.